I said in part 1 that I had covered all the important stadiums that were demolished in this decade, and like the fool that I am, I completely forgot about some huge stadiums, including one glaringly obvious one. Seriously, you'll know it when you see it. How could I forget about that? Such an idiot. So here are more stadiums demolished in the 2010s. Cardinal Stadium, Louisville Cardinals. Continuing the trend of multi-purpose stadiums that we saw in part 1, Cardinal Stadium was home to baseball, American football, and soccer. But the football team had the longest stay at the stadium, 40 years. It was also home to a couple of professional baseball and football teams throughout the years. Normally it's disappointing to see a stadium demolished, but just looking at it, I don't think it belonged in the 21st century. The design was purely utilitarian, and as is often the case with multi-purpose stadiums, it was not quite right for either sport. The Cardinals football team now play at a new Cardinals stadium, and the site is now a beautiful concrete slab. Carisbrooke, Highlanders, Otago Rugby, and it even hosted cricket. Only in New Zealand is it normal to mix rugby and cricket. The stadium dated back to the late 1800s and was made up of an eclectic mix of different stands that had been added and altered over time, giving it a bit of an interesting look. For a long time, the embankment on the side of the freeway acted as a perfect grass berm for spectators to enjoy the game from without buying a ticket. This was known as the Scotsman's Grandstand. Okay, I'm like half Scottish or something, and I've got to say, I'd be offended if it wasn't hilarious. Much like Scotland, Dunedin is known for being chilly for most of the year, so the rugby teams went and built a greenhouse to play in, a marvellous one at that, and cricket moved to this quaint little ground. As for the site, well, I think a steel company has built a couple of warehouses there or something. San Mamés, Bilbao. Although dating back to the early 20th century, the stadium was mostly rebuilt for the 1982 World Cup. Still, it counted as Spain's oldest football stadium, being 100 years old when it was demolished. I do love an arch, and the one that supported the roof of the main stand was rather nice. So nice that they dismantled it and moved it to their training facility. See, there it is in the car park waiting to be erected. And here it is post-erection, standing proud. Okay, enough of that. Much like Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, the new San Mamés was built right next door while the old stadium was still in use, and it sort of enveloped it once again. And it too is a world-class stadium. Taylor Field or Mosaic Stadium, Saskatchewan Roughriders. Do you ever hear someone's voice and assume that they're American until they say the word "a boot"? Well, that's basically what Canadian football is. You might just assume you're watching some college game in the States, and then you're like, hang on, why are those end zones so big? Anyway, not important. The stadium had an interesting look to it. It was made up of 4 separate stands, none of which were the same shape or size. Interestingly, they spent nearly 15 million loonies on upgrading the facility in 2012, knowing that it would be replaced in just a few years. Pretty fantastic replacement though. It too goes by the name Mosaic Stadium, and it's about 400 meters or a quarter mile from the old site, which is yet to be developed. National Stadium. It was the host of the 1964 Summer Olympics, however it was built 6 years prior to host the 1958 Asian Games. You remember those? Oh, I remember the 58 games fondly. The design was a simple asymmetrical bowl. It was not just the height of the stand that changed, but also the gradient. Not unlike the stadium used at the following Olympic Games in Mexico. It stayed more or less the same throughout its entire existence. It was not the first stadium to be built on the site, and it wouldn't be the last. As you may already know, it was replaced by the new National Stadium built on the same site, which hosted the 2020 Olympics. It's considerably larger to handle what I presume was a much larger crowd at the 2020 Olympics. Shut up. Thank you. Texas Stadium, Dallas Cowboys. When you first see this stadium, it's somewhat noticeable that the roof doesn't look quite right. It looks like it was meant to have a retractable roof, but there isn't one, just a hole. And that's true. The initial plans did include a retractable roof, which would have been an incredible accomplishment in the 1970s. would have made it the first NFL stadium to have one. But they realized the structure just wouldn't be strong enough to handle the additional weight. It was still ahead of its time in at least one aspect, and that was the sheer amount of skyboxes. Normal by today's standards, but back then, not so much. The Cowboys moved to this fantastic stadium in Arlington, and the site has since been turned into the world's worst golf course. There are no greens, no holes, very little grass in general, just terrible. Estadio Fontenova, Bahia and Vitória. It was quite a bare-bones stadium with a bare concrete exterior matched with bare concrete steps to sit or stand on for the most part. But what set it apart from other stadiums in Brazil was the open end that offers views of the nearby body of water, and of course the city of Salvador itself. What caused the decision to finally tear this stadium down was an incident where one of the upper terraces collapsed and tragically killed 7 people. That happened in 2007, but it wasn't demolished until 3 years later. A modern version of the stadium was built in its place, and it too has that open-ended design, albeit slightly different. Ivor Wynne Stadium, Hamilton Tiger Cats. Apparently I forgot that Canada existed in the last video. This one dates back to the late 1920s, where it was built for what is known today as the Commonwealth Games, but they called it the Empire Games back then, which does sound like something that might involve lions. It was showing its age, it looked like something from way back, and it even had wooden benches for seating for the most part. Much like the last one, a lick of paint does make a difference, but it can only do so much. Tim Hortons Field was built in this place. And those were some more stadiums demolished from 2010 onwards. If you enjoyed the video, then please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, have a good one.